blind bride was humiliated right at the wedding. Everyone laughed, until she took off her blindfold. Who she really is will leave you speechless. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The scent of smoke came before the scream. At first, Naya thought it was just someone's overcooked dinner. The Hales were careless like that, always burning toast, leaving candles too close to the drapes, forgetting the oven on. It wouldn't be the first time something in their opulent house threatened to ignite. But then came the scream, sharp, human, and full of panic, and suddenly the walls themselves seemed to shudder with heat. She stood in the middle of the hallway, barefoot, her hands still damp from doing the dishes. The party had been winding down. Just a few guests left sipping drinks in the lounge, a few others saying long, lingering goodbyes. And then the fire alarms began to wail. "Naya, Naya, get out!" someone yelled. But she didn't run. Not yet. Smoke was curling like fingers under the doorways, seeping down the staircase like a slow-moving wave. It was thick, dark, and foul. Somewhere upstairs, Trevor was supposed to be getting dressed for a final toast. His parents were downstairs, schmoozing a city councilman. And suddenly, the whole house became a blur of motion and rising terror. She ran, but not away from the flames. She ran toward the stairs, up through the smoke, calling Trevor's name, coughing as the air bit at her lungs. People were scrambling outside, gathering on the lawn, calling 911. But she climbed higher, her eyes watering, her hands reaching for railings that were already warm. Trevor's room was at the end of the corridor. The handle was hot, too hot. She used the edge of her sleeve to twist it, shoved the door open. Flames danced along the far wall, already licking the edges of curtains and the frame of the bed. He was slumped on the floor, one leg pinned under the dresser that had fallen. He wasn't moving. She didn't think. She dove in. The heat wrapped around her like a burning coat, but she moved forward. She screamed his name and somehow managed to lift enough of the dresser to drag him out. Her arms trembled. Her throat was raw. By the time she dragged him down the stairs and out into the night, her body was already failing her. The last thing she remembered before everything went black was the overwhelming brightness of the flames, and the way Trevor didn't open his eyes, not even once. When she woke up in the hospital, the world was gone, or rather it was still there, but hidden behind a veil of darkness. She blinked and blinked, but no light came. No shapes, no movement. Only voices. And pain. "Naya, sweetheart," her mother whispered, her warm fingers wrapping gently around her wrist. "Don't panic. The doctors are doing everything they can." She couldn't cry. Even her tears seemed stunned. The doctors spoke in low tones at first. They said things like corneal damage, severe smoke exposure, optic nerve inflammation. They said there was hope, maybe, with surgeries, but it would take time, months, maybe years, and even then, no guarantees. Trevor came to see her once. He held her hand and cried, told her how grateful he was, told her she was his hero, that he'd be by her side no matter what. And she believed him because Naya had always believed in the good in people, even when they disappointed her. Trevor had flaws, sure. He was vain, self-absorbed, and used to getting his way. But he had never been cruel, or so she thought. The hospital room became her world for the next 3 months. She learned to navigate its corners by touch. She memorized the placement of the bed, the sound of the heart monitor, the faint rattle of the IV. Her mother stayed by her side through most of it. Her brother, Mal, came when he could, though being a soldier stationed out of state made it difficult. But Trevor became a regular fixture. He brought her flowers, read to her from the news, told her about the outpouring of support from the public. People were calling her a hero. There was even talk of awards, grants, magazine covers. "She's remarkable," Trevor would say to reporters. "She risked her life to save mine. How many people would do that?" Naya didn't mind the attention. Not at first. It was nice to be acknowledged. But she began to notice a pattern. The questions were always directed at Trevor. The photos were always staged just right so that she looked demure, fragile, grateful, and he looked like a savior. When she was finally discharged, she was brought not back to her small apartment in Eastwood, but to the Hales estate. "You'll be safer here," Trevor insisted. "We have staff, security, nurses. You won't have to lift a finger." She didn't want to be a burden, but she couldn't argue. Not then. She was still learning to walk without bumping into furniture, still adjusting to the silence behind her eyelids, so she moved into Trevor's guest wing, where everything was plush and silent, where voices whispered around her, never to her, where doors clicked shut just out of reach and her white cane became her constant companion. Trevor was patient. For the first few weeks, he guided her gently, held her hand when they walked, spoke slowly, clearly. But soon that gentleness started to wear thin. He grew irritable when she asked for help finding things, snapped when she knocked over a glass, sighed when she couldn't recognize which of his friends had come to visit. "It's fine," he would say, forcing a smile whenever someone else was around. "She's adjusting, poor thing." It was always poor thing. "She means well. She's still recovering." And she hated it, but she smiled anyway. She stayed quiet. Because she had nowhere else to go. Because he was supposed to love her. Because he had promised. One afternoon, she overheard a conversation he had with his mother on the patio. They thought she was asleep. "I know she saved my life, Mom, but this isn't a life. She's not the same. I can't keep pretending." "Darling," his mother said in that clipped tone Naya had come to dread, "you've done more than enough. No one expects you to actually marry her." "People do. The media, that senator, they keep saying I'm a hero." "Then use it. Milk it for all it's worth. But don't get trapped by guilt. You've done your part." Naya sat in her room, fists clenched in her lap, trying to breathe through the pain. She told herself she must have misheard, that she was being paranoid. But the pattern kept repeating. Trevor started coming home later. Canceled their dinners, ignored her calls. When she tripped and fell down the stairs one evening, he didn't even take her to the doctor himself. A maid did. And yet, in public, he still smiled, still gave speeches, still introduced her as the woman who saved me, still let the cameras linger on the way he held her elbow. One night, she lay awake and whispered into the darkness, "What if I never see again?" The silence answered her. It was her mother who finally broke it. "There's a specialist," she said one day, "out of state, expensive, but I know a man who might help. He owes me a favor." Naya hesitated. "And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll know we tried." She went. The surgeries were painful, slow. There were moments when she wanted to give up, but her mother stayed beside her. The doctor was kind, and little by little shadows returned, then outlines, then light. 3 months later, she could see. Not perfectly, but enough. The moment she saw her mother's face again, creased with worry and love, she cried for hours, not just for joy, but for everything she had lost, for everything that had been taken. "I'm not going to tell Trevor," she said, her voice low. "Not yet." Her mother frowned. "Why?" "Because I want to see who he really is, now that I can." She returned to the Hales estate. with her dark glasses, with her cane, with a heart burning for truth. And Trevor never suspected. He didn't notice the way she began to move more confidently, how she no longer fumbled for her teacup, how her steps no longer faltered. He didn't see the way she was watching him. She kept the act alive for months, waiting, recording, listening, and when he finally proposed, live on stage during a charity gala, she said yes with a radiant smile, and fingers curled into fists behind her back. Because now she could see everything, and she was going to make sure the world did too. The morning after the gala proposal dawned quiet and gray, with rain tapping gently at the windows of the Hale estate. In the guest wing, where Naya now lived, the air was still, heavy with the scent of roses from the extravagant bouquet Trevor had ordered after his public declaration. Cameras had flashed, applause had roared, and social media had erupted with praise for the man who proved love transcends all obstacles. And through it all, Naya had stood smiling, fingers delicately brushing the microphone as she nodded through words she barely registered. She remembered how Trevor had dropped to one knee, his voice trembling, not from emotion, she now knew, but from the effort to look sincere. "She saved my life," he had said, eyes shining under the spotlight. "She showed me what true strength is. I want to spend the rest of my life giving her the love she deserves." The crowd had cheered, wiping tears from their eyes, and Naya, behind dark glasses and layers of deception, had whispered yes. In the quiet of the estate, after the party ended and the applause faded, Naya sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded in her lap, and listened to the silence. She had never felt so wide awake. It had been almost 3 years since the fire stole her sight. 3 years since she had become a shadow of herself, reduced to whispered pity and gentle pats on the hand. In those years, she had learned how to live without sight, and then how to pretend she still couldn't see even after it returned. Her mother's contacts had come through with the surgeries. Painful, prolonged, terrifying, but they worked. Her vision came back slowly, like a curtain lifted millimeter by millimeter, first light, then blurry shapes, then color, then, finally, definition. When she returned to Trevor's world, she chose not to reveal the truth, not because she enjoyed the lie, but because she needed to know the truth of his heart. What would he do when he believed she was still helpless, still blind, still at his mercy? He had answered her again and again. It began with the little things. The toothbrush moved to a different spot every day. Clothes mismatched deliberately, knowing she couldn't see the colors. Her shoes replaced with slightly different sizes just to watch her stumble. He would let her bump into furniture he'd intentionally shifted slightly off position. She'd laugh awkwardly each time, swallowing the growing pit in her stomach. He'd shrug. "You're doing great, babe. You're just tired." But she was not tired. She was furious. Trevor's friends visited more often now. Wealthy, smooth-talking, well-dressed. They treated her like a mascot. One even patted her head at a party, joking, "It's so inspiring what you two have. You're like a charity campaign in motion." Trevor laughed harder than anyone else. Naya kept her smile fixed. She learned to listen better than anyone. She memorized patterns, voices, footsteps, every insult muttered under breath, every "she can't hear me" comment. She documented everything. Her brother, Mal, now home from deployment, had taught her how to use a discreet recorder embedded in a pendant. "If you're going to take him down," he had said, "you'll need evidence. No one believes a blind woman when she says she saw the truth." And so she collected truth. When Trevor thought she was asleep, he spoke freely on the phone. "It's exhausting, bro. he had whispered one night. 3 years of hand-holding. I deserve a real woman, someone who's not dead weight. Another time, she's not even hot anymore. You should see the clothes she insists on wearing. She's lucky I haven't dumped her already. Each time, Naya's hands clenched tighter around her cane. Each time, she repeated to herself, just a little longer. She observed everything, how he flirted with the new assistant in front of her, knowing she couldn't see, how he whispered sweet words to her only when the cameras were near, how his touch, once gentle, had become rough, dismissive, cold. He planned the wedding like a press event. The venue would be the Hale Estate Garden, complete with white tents, imported flowers, and a guest list featuring the city's most influential names. Every step was curated, every photo op scheduled. "We'll have a stylist dress you," he said one evening. "You'll look stunning. Trust me." Trust. That word used to mean something to Naya. She didn't argue, let him plan, let him think he was in control. Behind the scenes, she orchestrated her own preparation. Her mother worked quietly, arranging for Naya's true dress to be hidden in a safe location on the estate. Her brother liaised with the security company, bribing one of the guards to look the other way when needed. And Belinda, Trevor's former makeup artist who had once helped humiliate Naya, was now secretly on Naya's side, having come to her in tears. "I didn't know what he was doing to you," Belinda had said. "I thought you couldn't see. I'm sorry. Please let me help make it right." Naya accepted. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of fake smiles and posed photographs. Trevor's social media team posted updates hourly, countdown to the big day, love knows no limits, heroic couple set to tie the knot. Behind closed doors, Trevor was growing restless. His true girlfriend, Lacey, was growing impatient. Naya heard them fighting over the phone one night. Lacey threatened to go public. Trevor calmed her with empty promises. "Just wait till after the wedding. 1 week, that's all I need." That was the final piece. Trevor didn't just want to use the wedding for publicity. He planned to humiliate her during it. Naya had overheard enough to know the broad strokes. He would stage a dramatic exit. He would confess that he couldn't go through with it, claim he'd been pressured, cry on cue. The world would forgive him. He would play the victim again, and she would be left shattered. Except she wasn't broken. Not anymore. The night before the wedding, Naya lay in her bed listening to the wind rustle the curtains. Her eyes were open, staring into the darkness she had once been trapped in. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who cried in hospital rooms, who flinched when Trevor raised his voice, who doubted her own worth. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had clawed her way back from nothing. A woman who had learned to see in every way that mattered. And tomorrow the world would see her too. Trevor came in late that night, smelling of expensive cologne and cheap liquor. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow, everything changes." He was right, but not in the way he thought. She smiled in the dark, eyes clear and focused. "Yes," she whispered to herself long after he had left the room. "Tomorrow, everything changes." The morning of the wedding arrived not with birdsong or joy, but with a disquieting hush that settled over the estate like fog. The staff moved more briskly than usual. The scent of roses and imported lilies perfumed the air with an artificial sweetness, and the Hale family's household hummed with orchestrated chaos. White tents were being erected on the lawn, golden chairs arranged in perfect symmetry, and silverware gleamed beneath gauzy canopies. Everything had been planned to perfection, not for love, but for spectacle. In her guest room, tucked into the far wing of the mansion, Naya sat still on the edge of her bed, Her fingers curled tightly around the silk hem of the nightgown her mother had sewn for her years ago. It was the only thing in that house that still felt real. She had hardly slept the night before. The weight of what was to come sat on her chest like stone, heavy and immovable, yet necessary. Today, she would be humiliated. That was Trevor's plan. Today, he would perform his final act of betrayal in front of cameras, politicians, and society's elite. But he wasn't the only one with a performance. A soft knock came at her door. She straightened and carefully lifted her dark glasses onto her face, slipping the white cane into position beside her bed. For weeks now, she had perfected the role of the blind bride. Unseeing, trusting, obedient. That role was nearly finished. "Come in," she said softly, voice steady. Belinda stepped inside, her expression too bright, too forced. In her hands was a garment bag, thin, cheap, and wrinkled. "I've brought your wedding gown," she said with a tight smile. Naya stood slowly. Her hands extended and brushed the bag's surface. She could feel the texture of the fabric even without looking. It was stiff, synthetic, poorly made, exactly as she'd expected. "This doesn't feel like the one I picked," she murmured. Belinda laughed, high and nervous. "There was a mix-up at the boutique, but it's still lovely, and will make you look beautiful, I promise." Naya turned her face slightly away, pretending to process this with confusion. Inside, her blood simmered. So the plan had already begun. They'd taken away her real dress, replaced it with this monstrosity. Soon, Trevor would make sure she walked into the crowd looking absurd. The world would see a blind woman dressed like a fool, and when he cast her aside, pity would cloak him like a hero's cape. Belinda moved to help her undress. Naya allowed it, standing silently as she was stripped down and redressed in the gaudy excuse for a gown. It was tight in some places, baggy in others, and a garish shade of pinkish beige that clashed with her rich skin tone. The fabric itched against her arms. The neckline was too low, the hem uneven. They wanted her to look ridiculous. They wanted to laugh. She let them. When the dress was secured, Belinda guided her to the vanity. "Let's do your makeup," she said cheerfully. Naya remained still as powders and creams were applied with too heavy a hand. The brush scraped against her cheeks, lipstick smeared just outside the lines of her mouth. Blush too bright, eyeliner too thick. She looked like a parody of a bride, but she said nothing. At last, Belinda stepped back and admired her handiwork with a small, cruel smirk. "You look unforgettable," she said. Naya's lips curled into a subtle smile. "That's exactly what I was hoping for." Belinda faltered slightly, then turned away. "Someone will come to escort you soon." When she was gone, Naya locked the door and removed her glasses. Her reflection in the mirror startled even her. She looked like a circus act, painted and propped up for mockery. The gown was worse than she imagined, the makeup an outright insult. But her eyes were sharp, alert, alive. From beneath the mattress, she retrieved her phone. Her hands moved with precision as she tapped out a message to Mal. "They've gone through with it. The dress, the makeup. He plans to announce it during the vows. Be ready." The reply came in seconds. "We're watching. He won't get away with it." Another message followed seconds later, this one from her mother. "Grayson is en route. He understands everything. Be brave. We're proud of you." She clutched the phone to her chest for a moment, steadying her breath. Then she tucked it away and reached under the bed for a small velvet pouch. Inside it lay the coral beads her mother had worn at her own wedding, rich in color and heritage, the symbol of dignity and honor. She slipped them into the pocket sewn inside the garish dress. The gown was a lie, but beneath it she carried truth. A knock rattled the door. "Miss Naya," a male voice called. "We're ready to take you down." She donned her glasses, resumed the slow, hesitant posture of the blind woman, and opened the door. 2 staff members led her through the corridor. The house buzzed with energy, clinking glasses, murmuring guests, photographers shifting equipment. As they stepped outside, the warm spring air hit her skin, thick with perfume and tension. The garden had been transformed. White petals floated in a shallow pool, golden arches curved overhead, and elegant guests whispered as she approached. Naya could feel the silence spread as she entered. She felt eyes on her. Dozens, hundreds. Her outlandish dress drew attention like a siren. Gasps, stifled laughter, confused murmurs followed her with every step. She kept her chin slightly raised, her pace slow and deliberate. The image of frailty, the image Trevor wanted. At the front stood Trevor himself, tall, striking, resplendent in a custom-tailored ivory suit. His hair gleamed in the sun. His expression, to anyone else, was calm and smiling. But Naya saw the smugness in the curve of his lips, the triumph in his eyes. He was watching his plan unfold with pleasure. He took her hand when she arrived beside him, cold and limp in hers. "My beautiful bride," he said loudly, turning to the crowd. "Isn't she radiant?" Scattered applause followed, but beneath the surface unease rippled. Elders shifted uncomfortably. Whispers spread like smoke. A family friend, Elder Johnson, stepped forward, brows furrowed. "Where is her proper attire?" he asked. "Is this the custom now, to mock our traditions on sacred ground?" Trevor tightened his grip on her hand. "She chose this herself," he said smoothly. "She cannot see it, of course, but it made her feel special." More murmurs. Naya's fingers trembled, but not from fear. The moment was coming. Trevor raised his voice. "Before we continue, I have something to say." Silence fell. He dropped her hand and stepped away, facing the crowd alone. His tone shifted, deepened, took on a mournful rhythm. "Friends, family, I've tried, I've truly tried. When Naya lost her sight saving me, I vowed to stay by her side. I thought I could handle it, the burden, the change. I thought love would be enough." The crowd leaned in, mesmerized. "But love," he continued, eyes shining with feigned emotion, "requires more than sacrifice. It requires compatibility, shared goals, shared strength. And lately, I've come to realize we're not right for each other." Gasps, sharp intakes of breath. Someone dropped a glass. Naya stood motionless. Trevor gestured toward the audience. "There is another. Someone who has stood by me through it all. Someone who understands me, completes me." From the side, Lacey stepped forward, radiant in a sleek blue gown that shimmered like starlight. She smiled demurely, feigning modesty. Trevor took her hand. "This is a woman I love, and I ask your blessing today, not to marry Naya, but to free her, and to choose happiness." Stunned to silence, he turned back to Naya. "You are brave, kind, but we both know this isn't what you want. I release you." A single clap rang out, then another. A few people, confused, began to applaud. Others shook their heads. Elder Johnson looked disgusted, but Trevor only smiled, basking in his moment. Naya's hands curled into fists. She took a step forward, then another, and just as she reached for the glasses shielding her truth, the first luxury car pulled up at the gates. The wedding had only just begun. The sound of engines outside the garden gates broke through the stunned silence like a clap of thunder. Heads turned, necks craned. The hush that had fallen over the crowd during Trevor's shameless announcement gave way to murmurs of confusion. A convoy of 3 black luxury vehicles slid to a halt just outside the entrance to the Hale estate. Their glossy surfaces reflected the golden afternoon sun like mirrors, and on the doors a discreet but unmistakable crest shimmered, an intertwined monogram marked with a stylized G. Trevor faltered. His hand still held Lacey's as he stood at the front of the gathering, caught mid-performance, but his smug smile twitched. He wasn't expecting this. Naya saw it clearly now, the tight clench of his jaw, the way his fingers flexed, uncertain. For once, he had not planned every second. The back door of the lead car opened slowly, and a tall man stepped out, dressed in a deep navy agbada embroidered with silver thread that caught the light in elegant, minimal lines. His bearing was noble, his movements calm, and his face was known to every person in that courtyard, even those who had never met him in person. Elijah Grayson. Industrialist, tech magnate, philanthropist. One of the wealthiest and most respected men in the country, and a figure so guarded and private that his rare appearances always carried the weight of significance. As he approached the garden, silence deepened once more, like a stage being reset. His entourage followed, 2 well-dressed men carrying ornate boxes, one more holding a briefcase, and another with a security earpiece scanning the crowd with quiet intensity. But Grayson himself walked without haste, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. Trevor recovered first. He stepped forward, smile fixed in place, voice just slightly higher than usual. "Mr. Grayson," he said, as if greeting a casual acquaintance. "What an unexpected—" "I'm not here for you," Elijah said, his tone smooth and firm, without so much as a glance at Trevor. "I'm here for her." The entire gathering turned to Naya. For a moment, no one moved. She stood alone, still wearing the absurd dress, the exaggerated makeup, the dark glasses that had hidden her secret for 3 years. And yet, in that instant, she seemed to tower above them all. She took one step forward, her voice steady and low. "Elijah Grayson," she said softly, "you're right on time." He gave a small, respectful nod. "Always when it matters most." Trevor's mask cracked. "Excuse me, but what exactly is this? This is a private event." "Hardly," Elijah cut in, this time turning his eyes fully on Trevor. "You invited the media. You opened the gates. You made this a public affair. So consider this a public answer." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Lacey clung to Trevor's arm, looking uncertain now, her smile faltering. Elijah took a step closer to Naya, his tone shifting from steel to warmth. "Miss Naya James," he said clearly so all could hear, "I come to you today not as a man seeking spectacle, but as one who has witnessed strength in silence, who has watched from afar as you bore indignity with grace and cruelty with dignity. I come to offer you, not pity, not rescue, but partnership." Naya's breath caught in her throat. "I have come," Elijah continued, "to ask for your hand in marriage, if you will have me." The courtyard exploded into sound. Shocked gasps, camera shutters, and stunned voices rising all at once. Trevor looked as though someone had slapped him. Lacey's face twisted in disbelief. Even the elder guests who moments before had nodded along with Trevor's performance now stood rigid, unsure of what to think. Trevor took a staggering step forward. "This is absurd. You can't be serious. She's blind." A beat passed, then Elijah said quietly but firmly, "And you are morally blind, which is far worse." Naya reached up with steady hands. Her fingers found the edge of her glasses. The moment she had waited for, feared, prepared for, dreamed of, was now here. Slowly, deliberately, she removed them and looked out at the crowd with clear, focused eyes. Another wave of gasps followed. Several guests physically recoiled. Belinda dropped the makeup brush she had been clutching at the edge of the gathering. Elder Johnson made the sign of the cross. Naya turned her gaze to Trevor, locking eyes with him for the first time in 3 years. He stared at her as if she had become a ghost. "I'm not blind, Trevor," she said quietly. "I haven't been for a very long time." "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "That's not possible. I regained my sight months after the surgeries," she said, stepping forward now, her voice gaining strength. "But I chose to keep it a secret. I needed to see who you really were, without the act, without the performance. I needed to know if your love for me was real." Trevor took another step back. "It wasn't," she continued. "You loved the story, the attention, the image of being the good man. But behind closed doors you humiliated me. You insulted me. You made a mockery of my trust, my love, and my sacrifice." Lacey was now trying to discreetly remove herself from Trevor's side, inching towards the back of the crowd. Naya turned to the guests, to the cameras. "He planned this. Every piece of it. The dress, the makeup, the rejection. He wanted to look like a hero again, leaving his disabled fiancée at the altar, rising above his burden." The murmurs grew louder. Reporters raised microphones. Guests looked horrified. Trevor was visibly sweating now, but Naya wasn't finished. "Elijah," she said, turning to him, "before I answer you, there's something I need to share." He nodded once, understanding. She pulled out a small audio device from her pocket and pressed play. Trevor's voice filled the air, unmistakable in its arrogance. "She's a burden. You have no idea how exhausting it is pretending to love someone who can't even dress herself. But the cameras eat it up. Let her walk down the aisle looking like a joke and I'll tell everyone I tried. They'll pity her, and I'll come out clean." Then came Lacey's voice. "She won't even know what hit her. That blindfold is a blessing. At least she never saw us together all these years." The crowd recoiled audibly. Gasps turned into outcries. Trevor went pale. "That's fake," he yelled. "She doctored that." "I have more," Naya said calmly. "Recordings, photos, witnesses. Shall I continue?" Trevor lunged toward her, furious, but was immediately intercepted by Elijah's security detail. He was restrained gently but firmly. His protest died on his lips as he realized there was nowhere left to run. Naya faced Elijah again. "You asked for my hand, not because I'm broken or fragile, but because you saw something in me. Not blindness, not weakness, but strength." He met her gaze with steady calm. "You see more than most ever will." She took a breath, her heart full. "Then yes," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Yes, I will have you." Applause erupted. Not polite, not tentative, but thunderous. The kind born of truth unveiled, of justice served, of a woman finally standing in the fullness of her own power. Elijah offered his hand. She took it. And together they walked past Trevor, past the ruined altar, past the fake flowers and cameras and gossiping mouths. They walked toward something real. The wedding Trevor had planned was over, but a new union had just begun. The air in the Hale estate garden hung thick with disbelief. The final echoes of Naya's declaration still vibrated in the hearts and ears of the crowd, while Trevor stood frozen, eyes wide and jaw clenched, unable to process the ruinous shift of power that had unfolded before him. His wedding had unraveled not with the drama of a storm, but with the silence of a tide slipping away, leaving him exposed and hollow beneath the harsh daylight. Naya stood tall beside Elijah Grayson, her hand still nestled in his. The absurd dress clung to her form, the garish makeup still a grotesque reminder of the plan Trevor had so carefully constructed. But she wore it all like armor now. Each piece that had once been intended to humiliate her only served to illuminate how far he had fallen and how high she had risen. But the day was not yet over. The crowd had not dispersed, nor had the reporters lowered their cameras. It was not enough that Trevor was exposed. It was not enough that Naya had accepted a proposal from a man of real substance and dignity. There was still more to uncover, more to break open in front of the society that had once adored Trevor and pitied her. Now they watched her with a mixture of awe and guilt. Some had clapped. Others had remained silent, caught between admiration and shame. Trevor tried to recover. He took a staggering step forward, ignoring the security still lingering at the edges of the gathering. His voice, though hoarse, reached for that same performative tenor he had mastered. "You're being manipulated," he said, pointing a trembling finger at Elijah. "This is a setup, a smear campaign. She's been lying for years, hiding the truth, pretending to be blind. How is that noble?" Naya didn't flinch. "I pretended to be blind," she said, her voice calm and resonant, "to test your heart, to see if you loved me for who I was without all the advantages. You failed, not just quietly, not in weakness, but with malice." Trevor's face contorted. "You lied?" "I watched you," she said. "I listened to you. I was beside you while you paraded me as your trophy and mocked me behind closed doors. You did not protect me. You humiliated me. You used me to build a career, to gain sympathy, to impress donors. And now you're angry because the truth stands taller than your lies." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Let her speak." And with that, the energy shifted. Trevor no longer held the audience's favor. The very people he had manipulated had turned from him. He was no longer the adored groom, no longer the noble sufferer marrying a blind girl. He was just a man, a small man, caught red-handed. Lacey, his secret lover, tried to slink away through the guests, but Naya's voice stopped her cold. "Lacey," she said, directing her gaze towards the shimmering blue gown, "do you want to share how long you've been helping him plan this? How many years did you smile at me, fix my hair, and touch up my lipstick, knowing I couldn't see what you were doing? Or so you thought." Lacey's face twisted in panic. I didn't." "You dressed me in clothes that made people laugh," Naya continued. "You smeared makeup on my face like I was your personal joke, and you told everyone you were doing it out of love." The silence that followed was a wall crashing down. Lacey said nothing. She turned and slipped into the crowd, her heels clicking like drumbeats of shame. Trevor stepped forward again, now desperate. "You think he really wants you?" he said, gesturing to Elijah. "You think Grayson is some romantic savior? He's just using you too. He's building a brand, a new narrative. Don't be naive." Elijah's voice, when it came, was cool and clear. "The difference between us is simple," he said. "I don't need to use anyone to be powerful. I see value in people for who they are. Naya doesn't elevate my reputation, she humbles it." Trevor's jaw tensed, and then, almost with a note of disbelief in his voice, he scoffed. "So this is how it ends? After everything I did for you?" Naya took a breath and stepped forward. She reached into the hidden pouch in her gown and removed a small, flat envelope. She held it aloft. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. "It's the original medical document from the surgery, dated and signed, showing the exact day my vision returned. You remember that day, don't you? The day you came home drunk and told me I was lucky to have you, that I wouldn't survive without you." She opened the envelope and handed it to Elder Johnson, who stepped forward with solemn gravity. The elder read it silently, then passed it to the guests nearby, who gasped and murmured as it made its rounds. "I stayed after that day," Naya said, "because I still hoped. Because I wanted to believe love could grow from gratitude. But what grew was your ego. You couldn't stand the idea of me not needing you." Trevor didn't deny it. He stood in place, stunned, his hands hanging limp at his sides. "And then you planned this wedding," Naya continued, "not to celebrate love, but to stage a public exit. You were going to humiliate me in front of cameras, in front of donors, and then walk away with the woman you'd been hiding in plain sight." A murmur of disgust passed through the guests. Elijah motioned to one of his men, who stepped forward and opened the ornate briefcase. Inside were glossy photos, email printouts, and a thick folder. "These are the contracts Trevor signed with his father's political consultants," Elijah said. "They describe in detail how to position the wedding for maximum media exposure, how to gracefully exit from a relationship with a disabled woman, and how to spin it as a story of moral courage." He let that sink in. A photographer snapped a photo of Trevor's expression, an image that would be on the front page the next morning. "I gave you 3 years, Naya said, her voice trembling only slightly. 3 years of my life. 3 years of silence, of darkness, of pretending I couldn't see what you really were. I gave you grace, Trevor. And this is what you gave me." She turned then to Elijah, and something in her body softened. The crowd watched, hushed, as she slipped the ridiculous veil from her head and let it fall to the grass. She reached into her dress and withdrew the coral beads, slipping them around her neck. Her hands were steady now. "I accept your proposal," she said again, not just to Elijah, but to the world watching. "Because you see me, not as a symbol or a strategy, but as a person." Elijah extended his hand, and she took it. Their fingers locked together, not as actors in a scene, but as two people who had chosen to walk side by side from this moment forward. The crowd erupted into applause, genuine this time. No pity, no confusion, just admiration and awe. Even Elder Johnson nodded in solemn approval. Trevor took one last look at the sea of faces that had once adored him. Then he turned and walked away without another word, the hem of his designer suit brushing the dust of his own destruction. The cameras followed Naya and Elijah as they moved toward the center of the garden, where the altar still stood, an ironic monument to a wedding that would never be. But now it was more than a relic of a broken promise. It had become a witness to a revelation, a throne upon which dignity had reclaimed its seat. As the drums began to beat from the back of the courtyard and women ululated in the traditional way, the ceremony transformed. Guests stood and applauded as Naya walked hand in hand with Elijah through the crowd. Her makeup remained absurd. Her dress was still wrong, but none of it mattered. Her face shone with purpose. Her posture radiated power, because humiliation had come. But it hadn't broken her. It had revealed who she truly was, and who she would never be again. The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the Hale estate, casting a warm golden light across the garden that had just served as a theater for ruin and rebirth. The scent of roses still lingered, mingling with the fading aroma of catered delicacies that now sat untouched. Guests who had once come expecting an ordinary ceremony now found themselves witnessing something closer to myth. Trevor Hale had been unmasked, and the woman he thought to disgrace had risen from the ashes of his betrayal not only with her dignity intact, but crowned with something far more powerful. truth. Naya stood at the edge of the garden with Elijah beside her, their hands still linked. Her body was tired, her feet sore from the heels she'd been forced to wear, her skin sticky under layers of makeup and synthetic fabric. But none of it mattered. Her spirit was alight. Everything inside her that had been dulled, silenced, or bent out of shape during the past 3 years had come roaring back into place with the firm satisfaction of justice. Yet there were still final pieces to be laid down. The world knew the truth now, but the reckoning had not yet been sealed. The press had begun their work with gusto. Already, camera crews were outside the estate gates, and microphones had been shoved toward Trevor as he stormed away, flanked by what remained of his team. His father's publicist shouting back at the reporters to show respect. But no amount of spin could repair what had been laid bare. The audio clips, the medical documents, the visual evidence, none of it was hearsay. It was history, recorded and replayed for a society that was learning, perhaps too late, how easily it had been fooled. Inside the estate, the remnants of the failed wedding were being dismantled. Staff moved quickly, trying to erase the spectacle. Petals were swept from the aisle, chairs were stacked, the string quartet quietly packed up their instruments. But no one dared ask Naya to leave. She had become the centerpiece of the day, not by accident, but by design. Elijah leaned toward her, speaking low so only she could hear. "You've done what most people never get to do. You held up the mirror. Let them see themselves." She gave him a faint smile. "I didn't do it alone. You showed up when it mattered." His fingers gently squeezed hers. "You've been showing up for yourself long before I arrived." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Johnson, who approached with slow, measured steps, a man known for few words and stern wisdom. He bowed his head respectfully to both of them. "Miss James," he said, "or perhaps I should say Miss Grayson soon." Naya felt a wave of warmth at the subtle affirmation. "Not yet," she said softly, "but maybe." The elder nodded and then reached into the folds of his robe to withdraw a small wooden box. He opened it to reveal a set of traditional ivory bangles, engraved with patterns so delicate they looked like they'd been spun from lace. "These belong to my wife," he said, "and, before her, to her mother. I believe it is time they found a new home." Naya's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the gift. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Elder Johnson replied. "Just remember. A woman's power is not in how the world sees her, but in how she chooses to see herself." Later, she and Elijah returned briefly inside the mansion, where Naya's mother and brother were waiting in one of the sitting rooms. Mal rose the moment she entered, his usual guarded expression softened by pride. "Little sister," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I saw the whole thing." Their hug was fierce and long. Her mother joined them, brushing hair from Naya's face with the gentlest touch. "Your father would have wept to see this," she said, and danced. It was Mal who broke the silence. "There's one last thing you need to do." Naya turned to him. "What is it?" He pulled out a small flash drive. "Trevor's family still has legal and political strings. If you want this story to stay untouchable, you have to publish everything. Documents, timelines, recordings. Let the world not only know, but remember. We upload this, it's archived forever. No amount of rebranding can wash it away." She hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "Do it." Within minutes, the files were transferred, uploaded, and distributed. Elijah's media team had contacts across major news networks. The story began trending even before they finished dinner. "Blind Justice," one of the headlines read. Another, "The Bride Who Saw Everything." By nightfall, Trevor's name had become synonymous with disgrace. Sponsors pulled back. Political backers issued statements of concern. His father's senatorial campaign was suspended pending review. Trevor himself had vanished from the public eye, no doubt shielded away in one of the Hale family's coastal properties, licking his wounds. But Naya had no time for his recovery. She had a future to step into. The following morning, a new press conference was held, not from the Hales' estate, but from Elijah's headquarters, where Naya stood on the stage beside him, now dressed in elegant deep blue, her face clean of mockery, adorned only with the coral beads she had brought from her mother's house. She addressed the crowd with clarity and strength. For years, I allowed myself to believe that silence was strength, that suffering quietly was noble. But I have learned that silence can also be complicity. That to let abuse continue without resistance is to become its accomplice. Today, I speak not only for myself, but for every woman who has been shamed, diminished, or used under the guise of love. We deserve more. And we are not afraid anymore. The applause was thunderous. In the days that followed, Naya received messages from strangers, letters from women across the country sharing their stories of abandonment, mockery, and gaslighting. Her inbox overflowed with invitations to speak at universities, panels, fundraisers. Her story had become a symbol, not of tragedy, but of triumph over it. But amidst all the new beginnings, she and Elijah found moments of stillness. On the fourth evening after the wedding that never was, he took her to a quiet garden behind his home. The sky above was velvet black, spattered with stars. He poured her tea, handed her a blanket, and for a while they simply sat in silence. "I never thought I'd trust anyone again," she said eventually. "I never thought I'd propose at someone else's wedding," he replied. She laughed, the sound full and alive. "You still mean it?" she asked after a moment, serious now. He turned to her. "Naya, I didn't fall in love with you on that stage. I admired you long before that. Your mother told me who you were. But it wasn't until I saw you stand against the world with nothing but your voice that I knew. You don't need saving, but I would be honored to stand beside you while you save yourself." Tears rose unbidden to her eyes, but this time they were not born from pain. "I think," she said quietly, "I'm ready to start again." He reached out, took her hand, and kissed it. "Then let's start again, together." They sat under the stars until the world felt quiet again, and when she finally leaned her head on his shoulder, she knew this wasn't a performance. This wasn't a script. It wasn't pity or debt or image. It was real. And this time she didn't need to pretend not to see it. She saw it all. A week had passed since the wedding that never was. A week since the veil was lifted, literally and metaphorically, and Nia James stepped out from behind the curtain of deception that had defined her life for 3 long years. The days that followed were a blur of headlines, messages from strangers, media appearances, and quiet personal reckonings. Every moment she lived now was layered with significance, not just because of the public storm her revelation had caused, but because she was finally living without apology. She no longer walked with the cane. It sat in the corner of her mother's apartment now, unused but kept as a reminder. The dark glasses had been discarded, as had the makeup Trevor's stylist once insisted she wear to look presentable. Naya wore her own clothes now, soft fabrics and deep earth tones, pieces that wrapped her in strength and comfort. She wore her mother's coral beads most days, not as a statement, but as a seal of heritage, as something grounding and true. Elijah had kept his distance in those first few days after the press conference, not from hesitation, but from respect. He knew how much Naya needed space to breathe on her own. When he finally called her again, it wasn't to propose another public appearance or ask her to join him at a fundraiser. He asked her, simply, if she wanted to take a walk by the lake. They met at dusk, the water glassy and still, broken only by the occasional ripple of wind. The lake was a place she remembered from childhood visits with her father, though she hadn't returned in years. It was there, on the old wooden path leading down to the water, that Elijah reached for her hand again, not as a savior, not as a man looking to polish his image, but as someone genuinely choosing her. They sat on a bench as the sun dipped behind the hills. "I keep waiting for it to hit me," she said, staring out across the water. "The weight of it. The loss." "Loss of what?" Elijah asked gently. "I thought I loved him," she replied. "I thought what we had meant something. But now that it's over, now that the illusion's shattered, I feel nothing. Just the relief of waking from a nightmare." "That's not nothing," he said. "That's peace." She glanced at him, studying the calm strength in his profile, the way his eyes rested on her without judgment or expectation. In that gaze, she found a depth she had never known with Trevor, a clarity that didn't demand her silence or her submission. "Do you regret what happened?" he asked. "No," she said. "I regret who I gave my years to, but not what I did with them. I used them to see clearly, to understand who I am, who others are when they think you're powerless." She looked away, swallowing a sudden surge of emotion. "I spent so long being silent, letting things happen to me, and now I want to be loud." "Then be loud," he said simply. "The world's already listening." It wasn't long after that conversation that Elijah's mother reached out to Naya,